This week on The Futurists.
In recent years, Tesla has really defied the skeptics and emerged as the preeminent electric car company in the world. Brett, I'm going to make a bold prediction here. I think that era has come to an end. Happy New Year. You are listening to The Futurists. I'm Rob Tercek with my co-host and business partner, Brett King.
Hey. Yes, I am
And this
here.
week, we've got a special guest, Katie King. Hi, Katie. Miss Metaverse.
Hello. I'm back. Happy to be here. 2023. Let's go.
Happy to have you back on the show. So you folks are over in Thailand right now. I can see this nighttime where you are. It's daytime where I am. Thanks for staying up late to record this special edition of The Futurists.
No problem. Welcome. Let's get into it.
All right. This is the week that we're going to take the bold stab at the future. Each week on The Futurists, we ask our guests to make a bold forecast or even a prediction. Sometimes they're game to do it. Sometimes they'll make forecasts and predictions and talk about what they envision for the future, going all the way out 30, 40 years out. This episode is our chance. We're going to do it. We're going to put our hand on the flame because we're going to actually put dates against our forecasts. So pay attention to this show, folks. If you're listening, this is the chance to find out whether we're right or wrong. Well, how shall we begin then, Brett? It's been a tumultuous year. 2022 was a surprising year. You know, looking back at it, I don't think many people would have forecasted that Russia would create the largest land invasion in Europe since World War II.
And
that came as quite a surprise.
Global recession that happened as a result,
Yes.
Which is, we tried to deny it for a while because we did have really good employment numbers, which is counterintuitive to a traditional recession. So this is the argument for why, the Biden administration, of course, didn't report the recession in the early quarters. But it's pretty clear now that globally, the economy is depressed. The question is, how long does that continue into 2023? I guess, right?
Well, and everybody's saying that this year there will be a recession. I haven't heard anybody who hasn't said 2023 is going to have a recession. So I guess the big question is how big or how deep or how long of a recession. One of the interesting things to notice about the last three economic resets or economic corrections is in the past, when there was a recession, when the recession would last a while, it might last a year and a half or 2 years. But in the last three recessions in the United States, employment levels took a very long time to restabilize. They did eventually restabilize, but they took years, many, many years. And what happened in the meantime was automation. Employers took the opportunity during a recession to replace human workers with either software automation or robotics systems. Brett, what's your thought about that? Do you think that's going to happen?
Yeah, the optionality on that is obviously increasing. So you're going to start to see experiments on the fringe of these spaces, like in the legal industry, and healthcare and so forth. You're seeing specialization. So in healthcare, you've got, oncology research looking at trying to get those diagnoses better and so forth. You've got surgical robots doing components. What you haven't got right now is the sort of administrative side of things. But when there's pressure on talent, then that's where you're going to go. You're going to be going for 40% of the cost of the healthcare system, at least in the United States. You're going to be looking after trying to robotic process apply robotic process automation to those areas, right? So, and in the same process, hopefully, getting the cost of it down. So I think that's a possibility off the back of the recession for sure.
I think it's true. I think healthcare is ripe for reinvention, and it's ripe for some kind of streamlining. Anytime you have an industry that's very expensive and produces a lousy consumer experience, and it's certainly true of healthcare in the United States, that's an industry that's ripe for disruption. We had on our show last year, we had Dr. Philip Alvada on the show, and he was talking about AI and healthcare and how to drive down the cost curve. His example was the simple diagnostic that you do when you go see a doctor. They do, they just check your weight and your blood pressure and so forth. And all of that now can be automated. And that saves about $250 per office visit. So healthcare companies have a great deal of economic interest in automation. No doubt we'll see more and more of that. It looks like diagnosis is a big area, tracking and identifying and spotting patterns, and then and making a correct.
And I think the evidence we've seen with the generative AI stuff, the art generated and the language generated AI stuff, we are seeing that these deep learning algorithms are getting much better at collecting data for reference purposes, and that's when you're talking about the advances in diagnostics. It's the same sort of models they're building on the imagery that's used in those disciplines. So, there should be some crossover in terms of the advancements being made in those areas over the next couple of years as a result.
It's quite astounding to me looking at the rapid take-up of stuff like ChatGPT and OpenAI's DALL-E 2 and Stable Diffusion and other systems for generating images. That was another big surprise from 2022. And those things existed. DALL-E 1 had existed for some time beforehand. But the rapid improvement, I think, was what caught people off guard. I started paying attention in the spring of 2022. And by fall 2022, those programs were quite good. They were not that great in the spring, and they were kind of weak in the summer. But you could see visible progress week after week after week. And I happen to be connected to a lot of folks who do art. And some of them jumped into this whole hog, like they just went for it and decided to master the idea of writing prompts for image generating apps.
Yeah, it's a whole new skill set now, right?
Yeah, but it's not very hard to replicate. You already have people claiming that someone ripped them off because they stole their prompt, which is just sort of, I think, funny, since the systems are trained on huge amounts of artistic work that other people did, and so who's ripping off who? But what people don't seem to see is how that stuff connects together into displacing real workers from real jobs. It's not just the stock image business or the illustration business that are going to be threatened. Of course, those will be. There are many other fields that are going to get disrupted. You can see advertising, especially social media marketing, being automated to a level that's hard to imagine. Yeah. And remember, Microsoft has the commercial.
All you need is a creative director, really.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So the human discernment and prompts are really going to be the place for humans to play and where to migrate to. The actual.
I didn't even think about that aspect of it but having worked in the agency side for many years.
Yeah, what's an agency? What do you even need an agency for when you can go to ChatGPT and say, write a marketing email in 5 paragraphs that sells the virtues of this product, and it cranks it out, and it's better than something you would have written yourself. The next step is to automate that and schedule it. Yeah. Because Microsoft has the commercial rights to the products from OpenAI, that means they're going to be able to integrate ChatGPT and soon GPT-4 into programs like Microsoft Word, Outlook, and PowerPoint. And so just imagine, soon you'll be able to say to PowerPoint, you'll be able to talk to PowerPoint and say, crank out a 10-page slide deck in the Sequoia format for a startup company in healthcare, and it'll generate it automatically. And it might even use imaging to make the images for the slides as well. Well, what do you envision for 2023, Brett, when it comes to things like ChatGPT?
Well, we do know the version 4 from OpenAI, ChatGPT 4, will be released probably around the middle of next year. And if the improvement that we've seen between version 3 and 3.5, or what we known as ChatGPT these days, it sort of is consistent with what we see in version 4, then already, prepare to have your minds blown. But the word on the street is actually that GPT-4 will make a much more significant leap in capabilities. So I think we're going to have the first AI that passes a Turing test convincingly. And I think that's going to come out of ChatGPT-4. So that's my big prediction.
I would have guessed that you could already, they could already pass the Turing test. What is the Turing test for those who are listening?
Well, in 1953, I think it was Alan Turing, who was the great mind behind the code-breaking machine that broke the Enigma in Second World War. And he founded actually this sort of principle on thinking machines and what would define a thinking machine. And so I think it's 10 parts to the test. But essentially, if you can have a conversation with an AI and not know it's not a human, then that's essentially the core element of the Turing test.
So your forecast is that this is the year, 2023.
Yeah.
We're gonna do that decisively.
Or at least we'll have the claim that it can do it, right? So.
I think we're already there.
What's happening too is, they're rushing to start to be able to fingerprint ChatGPT. So this way, yeah, a lot of people are going to be using it to create essays and whatnot. In fact, they actually made a new term for it called algorithm. So instead of plagiarism, it's algorithm, because it's AI assisted plagiarism. So, actually, I think the next step, my prediction is that we're going to be seeing people working for the AIs. So they'll be actually jumping in, taking these AI plagiarized works, let's say, and helping create a custom version of it that people can use and pass it off. And, it's kind of a backwards way of what's happening right now. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. In fact, you could argue that we already are working for the AI. When we're trying to guess or game the system and figure out how to write a good prompt, really, that's the AI training us how to talk to it, how to use, how to find the right words to get the result that we want. And it's worth noting that, the millions of people that have been using Stable Diffusion and DALL-E 2 and so on, that's free labor. Like, people have been gleefully volunteering to train these AIs, and that's a ton of money that these companies have saved in the process. So I think you're right, Katie, that AI is going to condition the workforce. It's going to train the workforce, even as we're training it how to think like us or how to talk like us.
Imagine even if, like a band like the Beatles, the remaining members of the Beatles, decided to release new music that was AI generated in the style of Beatles.
Actually, scary thought, highly likely. You've probably already seen those AI generated images of what Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin would look like if they were still alive today. We can even generate the artists that are dead and bring them back to life, keep them working forever in virtual form. Grim stuff.
Isn't that an episode of Black Mirror?
Unfortunately, that's one of the things when we start talking about the future, it sure does seem like Black Mirror.
Yeah, but a part of that is the human behavioral element. And I think if we could get people really sort of focused on mission, which I think, it won't come in the next couple of years, but could come after that, particularly with the stuff around climate change. What do you think about climate issues this year, Robert?
I've got a lot to share on that subject, but before we go there, let me just offer one other thought here, which is about games and AI, because it kind of links together those two ideas.
Okay. Cool.
So in the gaming industry, gaming is an interesting field, and we're going to have Dean Takahashi come out. Dean is a long-time observer in the game industry, so he'll tell us about the future of games in a coming episode of the Futurists.
That's going to be cool.
As a preview of that, there's a big transaction that's about to happen. Microsoft wants to buy Activision. Activision is one of the biggest independent studios that's left.
Right.
Gaming industry has gone through a tremendous wave of consolidation over the last decade. The biggest gaming companies in the world are now American. Chinese company Tencent is the biggest gaming company in the world. Sony is also a major player. And so Microsoft's trying to scale up to compete. Now, there's a lot more to the story than that, because as we've talked about on this show, Brett, several times, gaming is really the place where you're going to incubate the metaverse. So if the metaverse or some sort of 3D world really does happen, it's very likely to occur inside of an online game. That's a great starting point for it. And arguably today, the best versions of the metaverse are inside of game worlds like Fortnite. So Microsoft's making a huge play in this space. Their focus is more industrial versus like simulated 3D environments for business. But this is their consumer aspect, is to go after games.
Yeah, but they've got Minecraft, don't forget, right?
They do.
Yeah, so taking Minecraft into the multiverse is a no-brainer, right?
That's a builder tool. Yeah, and that really is important because in the metaverse, everybody's going to be a creator, right? So people are going to make stuff. So companies that have good builder tools are going to be the ones that get the best users. Yes. And Microsoft's been acquiring a lot of communities, gaming communities. They've been very focused on that. They also own LinkedIn, so they have business community as well. And so anyway, that's some of Microsoft's strategy. However, they've run into a lot of resistance with this acquisition. So this would be, if Microsoft were to buy Activision, it would be the largest acquisition in the gaming business. And both the EU and the United States government have indicated that they're going to fight it. And the U.S. is suing Microsoft to stop it. That's the Federal Trade Commission, which is headed by Lena
on an antitrust basis.
That's exactly right. So Microsoft's been down this road before. What's interesting is the president of Microsoft has resisted it. He said we've tried to play nice with the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission. They're going to fight it. So we're going to see this epic fight. My forecast is that Microsoft will prevail. I think that the U.S. government is going to have a hard time proving that Microsoft is in any kind of position to dominate the gaming space because they're not the biggest company in the world. And if they don't allow this merger to occur, you're going to have two wounded giants in the United States who are both vulnerable, or in some respects, to these larger international players.
Yeah.
So we'll find out this year. But anyway, in the gaming space, I think a deal with a lot of implications for the metaverse and immersive 3D worlds.
Well, on that, what about the Apple reality glasses coming out? Could be later this month, so that's going to be huge. I mean, not only is it just going to be about the augmented reality and the head-mounted display tech, can't believe that we're going to get it this year. The other element of it is that, we have a whole new world of apps coming. Because the visualization of content and and making it smartly interactive is going to be such an art. It's going to be very different from mobile. So you have to have new content created for this as well, which is going to create a whole new series of businesses off of these augmented reality apps. So that we're actually going to see the start of that this year.
I think that's right. Everything up to this point has been preliminary, and as a historical parallel, I'd point to companies like RIM and Palm and Nokia in the mid 2000s. Those companies were all making a version of a smartphone, sort of like a prototype of a smartphone. At the time, they were called smartphones, but they weren't that smart, and they weren't that capable. And they hadn't figured out the app model. The app store model wasn't really working. You had to go through your mobile operator in 2005 to buy any kind of downloadable item.
The fintech, boom is due to the mobile smartphone.
Yeah, that's right. It extended into really every aspect of life. So the big question is, will AR and maybe VR, augmented reality or virtual reality or mixed reality or extended reality, will these devices replace the smartphone? Will they be an extension of the smartphone? Will they further entrench companies like Apple and Google in this space? Or will a new company displace them? Meta has been betting the bank on displacing Apple. There's a kind of an open rivalry between Facebook and Apple. Mark Zuckerberg has not hesitated to throw billions of dollars at the problem. Arguably, the Meta Quest is the best virtual reality device. I like it. It's an awesome device. The problem is that people don't use them very much. The average Meta Quest is used multiple times. Basically, it's expensive thing that collects dust. So
you guys talked about that on your show.
Yes.
Yeah. And we talked about Pico as well, which is interesting because I saw a stat the other day that the Pico 4 headset is actually the fastest growing headset that's being used on Steam VR. So these gamers aren't necessarily going to Meta, they're branching out now. And HTC coming out with a new headset as well that I think is going to release at CES. And there's a bunch of new VR, AR headsets coming out, but there's also sort of a division between, ones that are going to be used with the smartphone, which we see mostly in Asia as well. Like Oppo has one that's used with the smartphone. It's basically an extension where you get to see a screen instead of having an actual television screen. You put on the glasses and you have this, personal screen. It's kind of a niche way of making it work, I guess, for now. But we will be seeing more of these smartphone compatible devices, as well as the Ray-Ban Stories. Have you seen that yet?
No.
Oh, yeah. Ray-Ban Story. These are really interesting. So Ray-Ban actually did a collaboration with Meta to come up with their own, prototype glass, because Meta hasn't initially come out with our glasses yet. So they're collaborating with other companies like Ray-Ban to kind of test waters and see how it goes. Now, Ray-Ban Stories, they price around $200 to $300, and they're kind of neat. They have dual 5 megapixel cameras. They have 3 microphones, voice touch control, and it comes in a charging case. So this is kind of like a step getting towards better AR VR glasses, like we'll be seeing with the Apple AR VR glasses, which will be in an entirely different price range, likely around $3,000.
It makes sense for Apple to do the same, right? Because they already have such a dominant position with the smartphone. And bear in mind, the last two generations of iPhone have already got ultra wideband connectivity built into them.
Exactly.
So that means it'd be very easy
For
to stick an
those
accessory on
devices.
your face that doesn't need to have all the battery power for processing and for network connectivity. You have all that with your phone. So
Right.
the strategy then is it's an extension of the phone as opposed to a replacement for the phone. Clearly, Meta wants to make it a replacement, right? So you're going to see two strategies emerge here. An incremental strategy where incumbent companies will reinforce or buttress their position by just making the AR VR device an accessory, and then another the displacement theory, which would be companies like Meta, where you get rid of the smartphone completely and you wear some sort of headset. It'll be an interesting battle. So yeah, great. We're going to start to see that battle happen this year. Anyone want to make a forecast about who's going to win the AR and VR sweepstakes?
Ooh, hard to say. I mean, I'd like to think that Meta's gonna still come back and survive, but I'd like to see some new game changers. I give it 50-50 that Meta will reign on, but we shall see. We shall see. I wanna see what the new HTC headset is as well, because they had a lot of potential, but hasn't quite delivered yet.
I mean, it does have the advantage of the fact that you can say you don't need to buy an expensive phone to do this, right? And so there is, I think, there's going to, it's the analogy would be Android versus Apple, right? Is that, or, Samsung. A lot more people would be happy to buy a Samsung at a little bit of lower price range than an iPhone. Right.
Candidly, I'm surprised that Google hasn't applied the exact same strategy here of not necessarily building the devices, but providing the software in order to extend their advertising.
And the other element is, if you look at the analogy of, the early mobile phone ecosystems, where the expectation was that, the mobile companies would have that advantage. Well, they lost that advantage. And it was mainly around hardware, right? But it was around operating system of the hardware. So then if you use the analogy, it depends really on the operating system of the AR and the connectivity of it and the network effect that happens there and things like that. It doesn't necessarily depend on, that pedigree of who's produced better devices on mobile in the past, right?
It clearly doesn't, because companies like Motorola, Nokia, and Ericsson were the dominant players. They invented the mobile phone business. And they all got blown away. Like all those companies just got completely sideswiped by Google and Apple. I think we're probably likely to see something like that. I would never bet against Apple. So my betting is going to be Apple's going to win. They don't release products until they know they work. The first generation is never the one to pay attention to. It's always going to be the next two, just like Microsoft. So we'll see something from Apple at some ungodly price point, $2,000 or something. It'll probably be pretty impressive and it'll be out of reach. But developers will buy it and they'll start to build cool experiences. And one thing we know, it'll be tightly integrated into Apple's ecosystem, because that's what they have to defend.
All leading up to the Apple Car by 2030.
What do you think the applications are going to be? Because the Federal Trade Commission is trying to block Meta from doing a fitness app. They wanted to acquire a fitness app, and Meta's fighting that as well. That's another.
Well, I think it's not only going to be fitness, but I think the healthcare implications, of this on an overall basis. Being able to self-diagnose and things like that, it's just incredible to sort of see how, the educational impact of this, all of that changes the way we think about, the current system. So
healthcare definitely needs to be decentralized. That's for sure.
We need to call it V-commerce or M-commerce, vision commerce, or
unfortunately, yes, we're going to get a new acronym. I think that creativity tools are a space to keep an eye on. I've always been a huge fan of Tilt Brush, which is one of the earliest VR apps, and it's one of my favorites because you can make stuff. I imagine that in these virtual worlds, we're all going to be creating things. And so we'll need better tools for doing that. So you probably see all this automation that we've seen in generating images. It'll get modified or adapted to generating 3D things, 3D objects, and 3D worlds. And there'll probably be a suite of VR creator tools that allow you to build environments and share them with friends, which, by the way, is something I think would be kind of fun to do. That would certainly change social media, maybe for the better.
Yeah.
Well,
Let's take a quick break.
Take a break. Yeah. We will skip our usual rapid fire round. Let's take a little pause here. Stay tuned. This is the forecast episode for 2023 and beyond. We'll be right back after this short break.
Provoke Media is proud to sponsor, produce, and support the Futurists podcast. Provoke.fm is a global podcast network and content creation company with the world's leading fintech podcast and radio show, Breaking Banks. And of course, its spin-off podcast, Breaking Banks Europe, Breaking Banks Asia Pacific, and the FinTech 5. But we also produce the official Finovate podcast, Tech on Reg, Emerge Everywhere, the podcast of the Financial Health Network, and Next Gen Banker. For information about all our podcasts, go to provoke.fm or check out Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show. Welcome back to the Futurists. We have a week of forecasts. What are the things we're going to see over the next 12 months in 2023 that are really going to be game changers in terms of the longer term future? And, we've been getting into that before the break. AR, VR, the metaverse, smart glasses, AI developments and so forth. But let's continue. So, Rob, what do you think about the progress on electric vehicles?
So the last couple of years have been extraordinary. The progress has been tremendous. We've seen, it's one of those technologies that you can see on the street. You notice it, and suddenly electric vehicles are everywhere. Charging stations are everywhere. And, Brett, for the longest time, I thought that Tesla had a lock on the future of the car. And clearly, I'm not the only one who thought that, because Tesla was the most valuable auto company. At one point, the valuation of the company was greater than all other auto companies combined, which seemed kind of extraordinary. And remember, the German auto manufacturers threw their hands in the air and they said, in terms of AI and software, Tesla has us beat. They're 5 or 6 years ahead and so forth. So in recent years, Tesla has really defied the skeptics and emerged as the preeminent electric car company in the world. Brett, I'm going to make a bold prediction here. I think that era has come to an end. I think that Tesla is going to be challenged. And I think that actually they already are a challenge. That's not much of a prediction. Here's my prediction. I think that in the next 2 years, by 2025, Elon Musk will no longer be the CEO of Tesla. And I know there's a ton of Tesla fans and a ton of Elon Musk fans out there. So give me a chance to explain where I'm coming from, and then fire away.
You didn't say Twitter. You said Tesla, right? Tesla.
That's exactly right. So big factor though is the investment in Twitter. The takeover of Twitter is preoccupied Musk. It's quite obvious, and as a result, Tesla's in trouble. Tesla's stock was down 65% in 2022, and already this year we're only a few days into 2023, and Tesla's stock is down a further 5%. Now, stocks go up and down. The stock market itself has been volatile and so forth. So there's a lot of reasons to say, like, well, hang on a second. Why is that such a big deal?
I mean, fundamentally, they're still doing very well. The top selling EVs in the world last month
that is true.
Was a Tesla Model 3 and a Tesla Model Y.
That's right. And it's the most profitable car company in the world. And that's what people like about it. That's what investors have liked about it. But there is a concern that Musk has become distracted. And I think there's a bigger set of issues that come along with that. It's not just that Musk is distracted by the Twitter acquisition. I think that's palpably obvious to everybody who's been paying attention. It's that Musk is no longer cool. Back in 2010, Elon Musk could do a guest appearance in Iron Man, in a Disney film, Iron Man, because he was kind of like Tony Stark. And people thought of him as this guy who could solve every problem in the world. He seemed like kind of a cool guy. Today, Musk is no longer cool. And when he shows up at a Dave Chappelle show, he gets booed. He gets booed by the crowd, right? So he's no longer seen as cool. And it's not just that he's not cool. It's that the people who buy Teslas tend to be blue state liberals, Democrats. Tesla vehicles are not a red state phenomenon. And when Musk took over Twitter and started spouting MAGA nonsense and repeating QAnon's conspiracy theories and so forth, he was sending a signal, and I don't think it's a very helpful signal to people who might be considering Teslas. Here in Los Angeles, one thing we notice is that celebrities love to signal their virtue by what they drive. And, back in 2008, it was cool to like show up at the Oscars in a Prius, right? So back in the early days of electric or hybrid vehicles, the Prius was kind of like the celebrity statement. Then it became the Tesla. Well, today Teslas are taxis, and the cool car is a Lucid or a Rivian, right? So it's been displaced. And if you want a high-end, fancy, publicity statement about your environmental legitimacy, it doesn't have to be a Tesla. There's other choices out there that are frankly more fashionable. So this idea that Tesla's uncool isn't just a matter of Musk's personality. It's also connected to the car itself. Remember, the Tesla 3 that you just mentioned, that car came out in 2017 and it hasn't changed substantially, nor has the Tesla Model S. These cars haven't really changed a great deal. They're overdue for an update. And there's a lot of competition coming, Brett. This is the year when every major automaker is going to introduce their competitor. Some of these cars will be better, some will be worse, some will be cheaper, some will be more expensive. So there's going to be a range of competition. But the point there is consumers will have a choice. And in terms of the competition, Tesla doesn't have any lock-in. I've often wondered, what's the lock-in factor? Is it the charger network? Is it the AI network that's, where all the cars are learning from each other? It's apparently there's less lock-in for customers with automotive
than
there is with
what's
software.
really interesting is, the brands you mentioned as competitors to Tesla, Rivian, and Lucid, not also from, the big vehicle producers. The big guys, the traditional companies, still really haven't got the design elements because that was a secondary consideration. Fuel efficiency and other things were the way they would specialize. And so, when you've got EVs and you just, with plans for higher levels of automation, you've got to think about the cockpit and the car very differently from a design perspective.
It's true. And the manufacturing process, right? Like big automakers are really great at making internal combustion engines. They've been doing it for 100 years.
Right.
They're not necessarily great at making electric vehicles. And that's been evident, right? Like, the electric vehicles that we've seen from the traditional car companies candidly haven't sold as much. They're very expensive. They don't have their same range. The big battle coming in 2023 will be the battle between Ford and Tesla. Tesla's Cybertruck coming out at $70,000 and the Ford F-150, the electric version of the F-150. A lot of folks think of Ford as a car company, but they stopped making automobiles. They stopped making sedans. Ford now makes SUVs and trucks. And the Ford F-150 is the most popular vehicle in the United States. So there's a lot at stake here for Ford. It's really an existential matter for them. And they're coming out of the gate with a truck that costs about $30,000 less than the Cybertruck. Wow. It's going to have far less range. So, if you want to have a model that's comparable, they'll be probably pretty comparable in terms of price. But the battle will be really between Ford loyalists and people who want that weird looking Cybertruck. So that's going to be the battle to watch. And that happens this year. It's going to be one of the most exciting things in the world right now, like old auto versus new auto. But one thing to bear in mind is the recession. And these cars are expensive. Electric vehicles cost on average about 50% more than an internal combustion car that's comparable. So a regular internal combustion car costs about $45,000. And the average electric vehicle costs about $68,000. So it's almost a 50% differential there. And in a recession, I think that's gonna weigh heavily on people's decisions whether or not to purchase electric or to stick with the internal combustion cars that they've had. So anyway, for all these factors, I look at this and I say, wow, Tesla stock is down almost 70% in the space of just over a year. The CEO is clearly distracted, and he's no longer considered to be Tony Stark. He's now considered to be kind of this MAGA boob, and so we'll see if he lasts. My prediction is that he'll be ousted from the role as Tesla's CEO by 2025.
Yeah, I sort of like to think he focuses on SpaceX anyway.
Going back to Ford, actually, do you know the new Ford Mustang? There's an EV. It's the electric Ford Mustang. I mean, talk about combustion engine loving types. I mean, geez. I mean, to see the freaking Mustang turn into an EV, this is mind blowing.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool that Ford was able to do that, right? That's a pretty big pivot for a very traditional auto company. And it's not a bad car, and they're sold out. There's a waiting list for them. So clearly it's got some appeal.
There's a waiting list for all these cars. I mean, speaking of Tesla, anyone who's been through the Tesla purchasing process knows that, it's very unique compared to the old way of buying cars. You'd walk
Not
in, you'd have
necessarily
someone
good
actually
either.
help you. No, more like you wait 7 or 8 months. Maybe it comes in on a barge, maybe it doesn't. And when it arrives, no one really helps you. Just find out where the car is in the parking lot. You drive it away. It's almost like getting a zip car.
Oh, is that how it works?
Interesting.
You just go
Yeah.
find it. It's sitting there waiting for you.
It is.
We went
Like a
in, it
rental
was
car.
like, yeah, that's your car over there. That's it. That was it.
They don't
There's an
show you how to
introduction
use it or anything.
There's an introduction video when you start it up, and we didn't even get the introduction video. I don't know what happened about that, but
No. So, but welcome to the future.
orientation.
Yeah, I hope you enjoy the heck out of it. Good for you for making that switch. I'm still sticking with an old gasoline powered BMW these days. I've been hesitant to get into it.
We've got a
mainly 'cause
project
range
we want to
anxiety.
do in 2023. We want to take a Porsche and convert it to an electric vehicle, like an old style Porsche. So
Hey, they're coming. Yeah, that's true. Conversion kits are cool, but they're coming. Like the high end German automakers are coming out with their electric cars, and it'll be really interesting to see what the landscape looks like. So anyway, good year for electric vehicles. There's going to be a ton of choice and a bunch of turmoil in that space. We'll see if
Sure.
Tesla can hang on to their position as being the most profitable maker of automobiles in the world. Brett, if you
Indeed.
got other predictions or forecasts to share with our crowd.
probably no. Yes. No, I think one of the other things is that next 2 years, expanding a little bit beyond just the next 12 months, next 2 years, we are going to see more extreme weather events. We were signaling this in the earlier part of the show, so let's jump into this because, the one thing that we had in 2022 is we broke all of the records historically for eco-refugees. And this is primarily because of events like Pakistan and so forth. But we also broke all the records in terms of heat, and extreme heat levels. And so this, unfortunately, is going to continue. The eco-refugee situation, we had 65 million eco-refugees this year. I wouldn't be surprised if those numbers start to look normal over the next couple of years because of these extreme weather events.
Yeah, I think that's right. I totally concur. My prediction would be that we are going to see the hottest years, the hottest weather in history, in recorded history, in 2023 and 2024. My reason for saying that is that we are in the middle of what's known as an El Nino cycle, the La Nina cycle. And, for the last 2 years, it's supposed to be a cold and wet time. And right now here in California, we're having this atmospheric river condition, this torrent of rain that's coming. And it's much overdue. We welcome it because we've had drought here for the last 7 years. So we welcome that. But that's a side effect of the La Nina cool and wet cycle. And as you just pointed out, despite the fact that it's been a La Nina cycle, we've had the hottest summer in history. Last summer in Asia, in China, in India, all across Europe, all across the United States, we broke heat records. And that's supposed to be during, that's what's in what is supposedly the cool and wet cycle. What's coming next in 2023 and 2024 is El Nino, and that's the hot, dry cycle. And that means that although all these places that are getting inundated with water now are going to be green and lush, and then they're going to dry out sometime in the summer of 2023. So we're going to see a range of wildfires all across the West in the United States and other parts of the world that got wet weather this year. But I think we're going to start to see record temperatures. In other words, that's a way of saying that last summer is the coldest summer you're going to have, even though it was a record-breaking heat wave. We're going to start to see even hotter summers ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. No.
It'll be hot every one summer. Yes.
What's it like in Thailand? Is it super hot now in Thailand in the summer, or has it not changed?
Actually, interestingly, it's got more moderate here. So it's gone from being more, it's more moderate. But Chiang Mai, in Bangkok at least, but Chiang Mai apparently gets a lot hotter. So it's getting to 42, 43 degrees Celsius, which is uncharacteristically warm. So, I don't know why Bangkok is getting slightly cooler, but it's manageable. I mean, we've been here during the summer a couple of times and it's manageable.
It's still in the 80s over here, so it's quite warm and a nice change compared to North Carolina at this time.
It's always hot and humid. That's true year round, even in that part of the world. One of the things you mentioned, Brett, is people are getting displaced and climate refugees. I think that's a really big topic because certainly here in the United States, immigration and illegal immigration is a gigantic issue. There's constantly a conflict at the border. And many people attribute those immigrants to people who are seeking better economic opportunity. But one thing we don't seem to take into account in the United States in the political discourse
is climate related too. Yeah,
that's right. They're leaving because the climate is unsustainable where they live. It's no longer sustainable. I know a couple of people from Honduras, and they said to me that they still have family back in Honduras, and they said we can't go back. We could never go back. We could never live there because the places where we were raised used to be very fertile, and you could be a farmer, you could grow things, you could grow fruit trees and so forth. They said that's over now. It's dry as dust, and there's no way to grow anything. And that's one of the reasons why people are being displaced and why they're leaving. So to your point, Brett, it's going to happen, right? Climate refugees are a fact. It's going to continue. It's not just people who are being displaced by conflicts, but we are going to have more conflicts over water, more conflicts over resources, growing in agricultural land and so forth. And that's going to displace a lot more people. What we don't have, and what I can only offer a pessimistic forecast on, is the political vision to anticipate that and actually do something about it.
I mean, we've got the opposite, right? We've still got people arguing that, climate change is not man-made. And it's like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's man-made. We need a plan to deal with this, let's just figure that out. But, you even have up until fairly recently, the last president of the United States saying it was a Chinese hoax. I mean, this is incredible that we're so close to these effects on the climate and these massive changes in terms of global immigration trends and food production trends, food scarcity and things like that, flooding of over 500 cities on coasts around the world. And we don't even accept that it's going to happen yet. I mean, that's just insane, but
I wonder how long that'll persist. How long do you think this idea that you can just bold-faced lie your way through a political career, do you think that'll persist in 2023? Right now, we're starting to see some pushback here in the United States.
Well, it can't persist forever. Right, go ahead.
No, there's definitely going to be a big change this year. I predict that there's going to be more restlessness, let's just say, when it comes to both the migration issues, climate issues, and overall just the political environment, in the US heading up to 2024. Oh, it's going to be a big year this year. Just all across the board, we're going to see a lot of change, but it's necessary change. We need action taken. Absolutely. So hopefully it'll be some plans will be put into place to help prevent some total dire scenario. But yes, 2023 will be a big year for sure.
The one thing I don't think we will quite get in 2023 is I don't think we're going to get an invasion of Taiwan. But I think there's going to be a lot more saber rattling around Taiwan. So, and there's going to be more challenging of US's military will against China, just testing the waters there a little bit, just to let the US know that China is getting more and more serious about this every day. And so unless there is a diplomatic solution to this, and the diplomatic solution is probably that Taiwan agrees to become part of an economic alliance with China or something like that. That's the one compromise that's possible. But I don't think Xi is necessarily prepared to make that compromise. But I don't think there's going to be military conflict over Taiwan. But I think there's going to be more pressure put on the US's willingness to respond.
I agree. You see that in the relationship between Russia and China. The Chinese are supportive of Russia, but they're keeping themselves at arm's length. They don't want to get caught in the crosshairs of the United States. They don't want to get dragged into the conflict in any major way. So they're trying to maintain a little bit of distance, because I think they're taking away the lesson that maybe the Russians should have been paying more attention to, which is that the rest of the world can actually unify. The rest. Let me say, when I say the rest of the world, what I mean is Western Europe and the United States and Canada.
And we need that on energy. We need that coming together on energy production, and the standards applied there. We need that to come together in terms of corporate missions, that the corporations must serve the greater economy and the needs of the people. Corporations that have been responsible for climate change, I think those brands are going to fall out of favor rather quickly.
I sure hope it happens. One of the things, to build on a point you guys were making a moment ago before the break about artificial intelligence, is the role of AI in warfare has been predicted and forecast for years and years. And the very first issue of Wired magazine back in 1991 or two forecasted the future of war, cyber war, they called it at the time. Now we're seeing evidence that drones make a material difference, a material impact. And it's not just predator drones, navigating above, trying to take out a terrorist leader or something, but now swarms of drones, coordinated drone attacks. We're starting to see evidence of that in the conflict in the Ukraine. And it's pretty clear that every military in the world is paying close attention to this. That's going to cause a substantial change in national security policy and defense strategy. But it's also going to cause a kind of new arms race. I can see now that every country in the world is going to equip itself with some kind of drone outfit. And they're going to have.
The problem is that a lot of these are going to be autonomous, right? So you need to start building ethical guidelines around the use of automated AI-based weapons, which we don't have a global agreement on that. As
we don't, and we know that Chinese are developing them. Specifically, they're developing drone systems to attack aircraft carriers. So it's very, very, very overtly a threat against the United States. And we'll be hearing plenty more about that from the Republicans in Congress in this election. That's a very easy prediction to make. What do you think about the moon? What do you think about the race to the moon and the idea of putting?
I would like to see Artemis get boots on the ground in 2024. I don't think it's going to happen next year, but I do think what we will see. Next year. 2023.
This year.
Yeah, it's that old habit to break. But this year, I do think we will see the first, second, maybe third orbital launch of the Starship as a test program, which gets us to the Artemis program in 2024. So, because the SLS could get us a preliminary sort of boots on the ground, but bigger groups of astronauts, and when it really starts to become an effort to set up a base on the moon and so forth, requires the Starship. So next year we'll see some really foundational flights for Starship, and hopefully it can get Elon a bit better focused.
That's right. Well, when you say next year, are you saying 2024?
2023. 2023 we'll see the Starship program expand. 2024 we'll see boots on the moon.
On the moon.
And that will be the Orion program with the SLS initially. And then it'll probably be 2025, 2026 where Artemis uses the Starship.
What's the story with the space station? Because I hear that it's in kind of like late stage of disrepair, or it's in need of repair. And is that something that people plan to do, or is the relationship between the U.S. and Russia frayed?
I think the current operation goes to like 2026, something like that, and then it has to be commercially driven. So at that point, they'll ask players like SpaceX and others, to look at taking it over. They will still rent space on the space station, NASA and the Russians. Russians may also keep ownership of their side, so it's not a guarantee that the entire space station is going to be turned commercial. But at least the US side will probably be. So tourists will be visiting there. It could be used by SpaceX as a developmental base for moving the crews to Mars programs and things like that. So there's a lot of potential use of the space station. I know I'm getting totally spaced out on everyone,
and mining operations as well.
Yeah. Asteroid mining, big topic. Probably not for 2023, but definitely out there. And there's plenty of billionaires that are chasing that dream. The idea is, someone's gonna send a robot spacecraft to an asteroid or asteroid that's made out of platinum or some kind of very, very valuable material, and they'll become the first space trillionaire.
Like Don't Look Up, the movie. If you didn't see Don't Look Up.
But that's why the moon's important, because they'll bring it back to lunar orbit. The fuel that they'll create for these robotic probes will be out of the water ice that's found on the moon. So the moon is the stepping stone to be able to do these things.
Great. Real estate development on the moon. Next on the Futurists. I
think that wraps us up for the show anyway. It's a good way to finish it. So great, Katie. Thanks for coming back on.
Yeah, good to see you, Katie.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Happy New Year to both of you, and Happy New Year to our listeners. Thank you very kindly, folks, for listening to The Futurists. Thanks for sharing it with your friends. And thanks for all those who've given us some suggestions and feedback and guidance on the kinds of speakers you'd like to see on the show and the kinds of questions you'd like us to ask them. That's incredibly helpful for us. And it's also very helpful, folks, when you're listening, if you give us a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps other people find the show, and that's been an immense benefit for us. In the first 6 months of this program, we've grown by leaps and bounds. We're so deeply grateful to everybody. Really, it's the best holiday gift you could possibly imagine, the support that we've gotten from our fans. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you all very, very much for listening to the show, and we're psyched to bring you another year of The Futurists. Big shout out to Kevin and to everybody else who's been helping us with the show. We have a fantastic crew at Provoke Media, and we are grateful to you for that support. And we'll look forward to bringing you more. Stay tuned.
We'll see you again.
Oh, we'll see you all again very soon in the future.
Future.
Well, that's it for The Futurists this week. If you like the show, we sure hope you did. Please subscribe and share it with the people in your community. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. That really helps other people find the show. And you can ping us anytime on Instagram and Twitter at Futurist Podcast for the folks that you'd like to see on the show or the questions that you'd like us to ask. Thanks for joining. And as always, we'll see you in the future.